So as Sharon was sharing about centurions, they were Roman commanders. In our context, they certainly would have been the enemy. Israel was occupied country. You can allow your imagination to put yourself in the same setting. When you're an occupied country, you're always under discipline, and it's usually pretty harsh. Centurions had a reputation of being completely no-nonsense, of being very harsh on their own troops, but even more so on the civilian population, because they were responsible directly for the obedience and the conformity of the people to Roman rule, Roman law and order. And so you might think of centurions as a combination drill sergeant, especially in reference to the harsh discipline, but also you might think of them as, for example, a colonel in reference to their social status. Their success as a centurion led to promotions and greater honor and more far-reaching vocational possibilities. A centurion would have thought in terms of how everything and anything would benefit Roman rule. He was an empire man. He wasn't indigenous to Israel. He was part of the occupying army. He came from a different land, a different culture, and this pile of rocks, backward, impoverished country of Israel was just a stepping stone to work through and to get out of and get a better assignment and move on up his career path. And his duty, above all, was to discipline the population. His theology, if you will, was to impose fear. But this centurion was different. He had learned the customs of the people that he was responsible over. He had learned their values and their worldview. He was a Gentile, but he had fallen deeply in love with Jewish ways, despite the suspicion it would have caused amongst his own, despite even the consequences of his next promotion. From his own wallet, he had built a synagogue for his subjects. This might be something like us, we Methodists, deciding to build Kingdom's Hall for a local Jehovah's Witness group of folks. Everybody would be talking about that. That would be astonishing. That would be noticed. The centurion, being a centurion, had slaves at his command, and yet evidently he treated them with fairness, which wasn't the norm. He had concern and care for their well-being. The centurion had established trust with those he was set over to monitor and control. He was a man of great privilege. He was used to having his way. He was used to being in charge. And the story reveals three characteristics of this man of privilege. First of all, he was self-aware. He knew he was a privileged man. It might sound duh to you, but a lot of people of privilege have no clue as to what they think is normal, how abnormal it is. But he knew he was a privileged man. I say to one of my soldiers, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my slave, do this, and it gets done. The centurion understood well his stature in life. He understood that he was a top dog, and the Jews were less than. But knowing this, secondly, he had, as Sharon said, compassion. He might be the top dog, but that didn't mean he had to treat everyone else as if they were stray dogs of no worth. His compassion allowed this Gentile to befriend his enemies, to care for their welfare, to build friendship and partnership, bridges, not walls. And third, he had humility. Despite his stature, Particularly in the face of Jesus, he could recognize that others had their own inherent stature. I'm not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only speak the word and let my servant be healed. And Jesus was utterly astonished by this Gentile man. I tell you, not even in Israel have I found such faith. About 30 years ago in La Conner, which was my first church, I was doing a children's time with the kids, and I was talking about the poor and how God had a special love for the last and the least and the lost. And suddenly Ryan, with this deeply concerned look, a worried look, scared even, said in a loud and anguished voice, "But Pastor, what about us?" Now, Ryan could never at his age knew or be able to articulate that he was privileged, but in his gut he knew it. After all, Ryan went to school with the children of the reservation and the migrant Hispanic children and others who didn't have what he had or lived in houses that he did or had the securities he had. What about us? What about the centurions? What about those of us who are not the last and the least and the lost? Does God love us? Are we of any worth? That's what Ryan was asking. So today I want to talk about the gospel to the privileged, the gospel to those who are not the last and the least and the lost, the gospel to the centurions, to folks who've navigated the capitalism of our economy, the status markers of our culture, the securities of our way of life that has given most of us blessings, not curses. What about us? I think the Bible, both the Old and the New Testaments, are just unbelievably super clear that God has a bias. God might love everybody, but God has a bias, and it's towards the losers. It's towards the oppressed. It's towards those who have no hope. God takes what is dead and gives it life. But there is another narrative that reads right along with that, and that God calls wealthy folk like Abraham, royalty like Moses and Esther, brilliant scholars like Daniel and Phoebe, hard-working achievers like Joseph, business owners like Lydia, well-educated professionals like Luke, who wrote the gospel here. God summons, and may I say it, depends upon those who are not the last and the least and the lost to do what only they can do, to do the works of God, the evidence, to be the evidence of a God who, like the centurion, is curious and humble, who is self-aware and compassionate, and who uses the resources at his command to build common wealth, not segregated wealth. The gospel, the good news to the privileged, is that they are God's valued change agents in the world. So have you ever thought of yourself as a change agent? As one who can help change the world that so often we feel powerless to shape. Literally, you are God's way of raising the dead, of giving sight to the blind, liberating the oppressed. Welcome to privilege. Blessed to be a blessing. When Ryan asked me, what about us? I should have said, Ryan, you are part of God's hope in the world. I mean, think about this. Imagine the impact that that centurion had on his troops. and the town. Think about Ryan overcoming the built-in cultural racism that was inherent in LeConner, Caucasian versus Indian, Caucasian versus migrant. If Ryan could overcome his fear of rejection of his own tribe, if Ryan can be taught a different way of seeing and feeling life, imagine what impact he can have growing up in that town, just being himself. Even in 4th grade, Ryan had a calling. We all have a calling. God aims to create a divine milieu of love that connects all of us together, all of us together, all people, tribes, nations, all creatures with creation, all religions with harmony. God yearns for witnesses to embody that vision. The privileged are called to be witnesses of God's Spirit, the Spirit that was in Jesus. And in the context of our scripture, that same Spirit that was in the enemy, the Gentile, the centurion. What about us? And the us I'm talking about is the church. Ryan will did grow up now in LeConner as part of the dominant culture. And when you're in the dominant culture, you're mostly unaware of how your dominance, which is so normal for you, impacts others. But what if Ryan, at the very same time that he's growing up and being shaped and discipled by that culture, is at the same time growing up in this countercultural community that has a bias towards the last and the least and the lost, that has a story that names all of life as an original blessing, that expects to find grace even in sad situations and suffering, that affirms critical thinking, multiple perspectives. If Ryan can grow up in a community that keeps alive the subversive memory of Jesus, that can teach him the mystery of prayer and silence, that can help him experience the sacred in creation and the image of God in others, all others. I mean, wow, that's an incredible gift. Sign me up. That's what I want. That's what I want for my children. That's what I will want for my grandchildren. That's what I want for myself, to be around that tribe. That's the aspiration of the church. That's the aspiration of this church. Our witness of God's presence in power is that. To be this countercultural community that has a bias towards the last and the least and the lost, and that has a story that says all of life is an original blessing, not a curse, not a fall, not sinful, not shameful, not full of guilt, not full of filth, not that you're unworthy, but that you are blessed, you are loved, you are cared for from the moment of your inception through death into transfiguration. That expects to find grace even in sad situations and suffering. That is so counterculture. Our whole culture is based on a denial of death and a denial of suffering. We do everything possible to avoid it, to not be around it, to segregate it when it comes. And yet there's a mine full of lessons to be learned. There is a way of life to be shared, even in the midst of suffering. But what community teaches us those skills, even acknowledges that those skills exist? A community that affirms that there's more than one way to read the Bible, which means there's more than one way to interpret your reality, which means you need to learn the skills of critical thinking. You need to honor and respect and joyfully play imaginatively and creatively with multiple perspectives. A church that keeps alive this subversive memory of Jesus, who does not fit any one of our political ideologies, that teaches us the mystery of prayer, that we can't control God, the mystery of silence, even though it scares us, that helps us experience the sacred in creation and the image of God in the other, all others, even the enemy. Where is that community? Sign me up. That's the church I want to be a part of. I want to be raised and discipled in that. Sherry Broman, after a year of grieving, wants to finally honor her beloved Harold. And just like that, 70 folks wrap themselves around Sherry and sign up to help that become reality. Sung Moon passes, but Carolyn does not grieve alone, nor does Lonnie Burchard grieve her mother, Beth Summers' death alone. 103-year-old Frances Dimming passes away in February, but her daughter Mary knows that this particular church, this sacred space that nurtured her as a child, nurtured her mom through her life, even after decades of absence when hardly anybody knows who Frances Dimming is, will be available to be part of bringing her mom to completion. Sign me up. I want to be part of that faithfulness, part of that commitment that believes that there's something more to life and that each of us matter and that each of us is part of a bigger life. Safe parking, which is literally saving lives, certainly strengthening and sustaining lives, simply could not exist without privileged centurions to fund it, to host it, to be mentors, to be simple witnesses of love in action. Every host is an agent of holiness, is Jesus embodied, healing in ways that cannot be seen if what you think healing is comes out of a Benny Hill spectacle. Healing's deeper and longer lasting than that. And if you understand the Spirit, you know that nothing in life is wasted. Simply showing up is the grace of God that builds faith. Sign me up. I want to be part of that kind of courage that doesn't have an immediate result. I do this. Look at that. Faith is I do this, and I do this again, and I do this again, and leave the results to God. Next month on August 29th, we're not going to build a synagogue, but we are going to build a neighborhood party. We're going to bring together fun, some soul-stirring jazz on stage. We're going to feed folks old-fashioned burgers and dogs, along with new-fashioned vegan options. We're going to use this whole yard for party activities. We're going to invite all of the folks, there are hundreds, by the way, who use this building, and all of our neighbors around this block. And we're simply going to say thank you for all the support and the kindness that they've offered us. And we're going to celebrate that we're making it through this time of biological plague and deep, deep political confusion. The church is going to bear witness to a love alternative, a divine milieu. We will serve our neighbors, asking nothing of them, just simply offering a witness of the love of God that bubbles up from within us. Sign me up for that. I mean, I want to help. I want to celebrate. I want to bear witness. I want to serve. The gospel to the privileged, the good news is that this world, is the canvas upon which God, the artist, paints a portrait of faith and hope and love. Life is about far more joy than it is of tears. Sign me up to a community that knows that. We who are privileged have been blessed. We who have been privileged have been summoned by God to be a blessing. We who've been privileged have the privilege of wiping away the tears of life's sorrows and the privilege of offering new beginnings. And there is an entirely new world that is emerging, seen and unseen. And we're part of it. Body of Christ, which is who we are. Body of Christ. Do you know who you are in the scheme of things that is life? Amen.